What does faith mean? Who is a person of faith? Is that something made up? Is it the crutch of the masses to have faith? There was a teacher in the former Soviet Union who, as all teachers, were mandated to eradicate any faith in God. So the teacher gets up in front of the classroom and says, "Does anybody see God?" "No, teacher." "Does anybody hear God?" "No, teacher," said the classroom. "Anybody smell, touch God?" "Well, you don't see, you don't hear, you don't smell, you don't taste, don't touch. There must be no God." Little Stefan, in the back of the room, puts up his hand. He says, "Teacher, I have a question. Classmates, does anybody see the teacher's brains?" "No." "Do you hear the brains? Do you smell, taste them?" "I guess the teacher has no brains." I once told this to somebody and he didn't laugh. "So I'll just take a bat, break open the head, and you'll find brains." I said, "No, you won't. You'll find 3 pounds of mush." "Brains? Where do you see brains? How do you know you got brains?" "It's not brains. It's some mush over there. We call it brains. How do you know?" "Well, I guess you got faith." Welcome to Tanya today. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad Zichin Kadesh in Montreal, Canada, where it's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. We continue in the 42nd chapter. Till now, we've been speaking about God sees us, and because he sees and hears, not because he has eyes or ears, he doesn't have a physical body or any kind of spiritual form even. But yet, he sees and hears. And because of that awareness that we have, the das, the knowledge of that, that makes us act differently. We act differently as a result. The more we're aware of it, the more you're not going to speak with it, a ill tongue. The more you're aware of your feelings and you got hurt, the more you're going to give a jab back with inappropriate words because you're aware of yourself, not aware of God. That's what we've learned till now. Now, the Alter Rebbe turns things around. If the king is seeing me at this very moment, what does that mean? That means I'm seeing him too. I'm seeing him at the same time, that means. And he gives a metaphor for this to appreciate this. If you're in the presence of a king, a human king, of flesh and blood, what is the fear that you have of the king? Now, it could be fear of punishment, right? If you're in front of Caesar, in front of Stalin, who acted like a king, right? despot. So it'll be fear of punishment, of course. But whatever, whatever the fear be, what's the fear of a real king? It's the fear of the fact that they have a soul within a body, because when the king is asleep, you don't have the same fear. Now, maybe you fear that you might wake him up and therefore he's going to be upset and off with your head. That's only the consequence of it. But what's the fear? It's like the brain, right? What's the brain? Piece of meat? Or is it the spirit in there that we don't see it? It's the spirit in there, right? So likewise with the person, the fear is not of their flesh, right? It's the spirit in their flesh, which we don't see. Is that clear? Mm-hmm. Because when they're asleep, that spirit is there, but it's concealed, right? At that moment, it's not revealed. So then when you're looking at that king, so really it's your mind's eye that is perceiving the true sense of who the king is, not your physical eye. Just like if you split open the brains of that teacher, right? What are you going to see? Physical. You're going to see physical. That's what you're going to see with your flesh. It's your mind's eye that has an awareness that there's something more. Mm-hmm. So that's the same thing as perceiving the king, right? That clear? Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's a metaphor for, of course, God, right? Likewise, the fear of God when gazing with the physical eyes at heavens and earth and the hosts is just enclosed in all of that is what? The Ein Sof of God. Mm-hmm. If you will, the spirit of God, the Ein Sof of God that animates it. Just as the soul animates that flesh of the king. And that there is intelligence in that brain. Not the teacher, that teacher's brains, but other teachers. Right? Now, you might ask a question. Right, it's a valid question. How do we know that there's brains in that teacher? We don't have to break it open and see in our mind's eye. We kind of know. The same thing is with that king. We know it's the spirit of the king. Are we present? That's wonderful. You're talking about. So it's we know in a certainty that the spirit, the soul of the king, is in the body of the king, because we experience every human being that way, and we experience the king that way likewise. So there's no question about that. But God, when we look at the heavens above, right? So what are we gazing at? We don't have the same certainty. So there's a distinction in our perception. Thank you. Right? In our perception, but not a difference in fact. There's no difference in fact. Just as the soul animates the body and that we have a certainty of that, likewise, God animates the heavens and the earth and everything in creation. That's a fact. The difference is it's not something that is as humanly perceivable, that animating of God, of everything in the world. So what do we need to do? We have to train ourselves to habitually look at the physical and recognize in the mind's eye that there's a spirit behind it. I don't have to train myself to do that when I look at you. Oh, you got a soul, not just a piece of flesh, right? I don't have to train myself, right? That's something that's, again, is so obvious to us. But when we look at heaven, when we look at a rock, we do have to train ourselves because we are looking only with the flesh, not with the mind's eye and seeing the spirit. So we have to constantly then be looking at the physical reality and reminding ourselves that that's not just merely what meets the eye. This ain't just a rock. No, no.
Okay.
That's not what I mean. That's not what we're saying. It could be present into a physical rock. We're not talking, that's not the point. Not present. Have to understand that there's a spirit behind the rock. That's not, it can be present in the physicality of the rock. That's not the point. Okay. That's why it's important to be present. So, because when you're going elsewhere, you're not getting the message. Okay.
I think you misinterpreted what I said by presence. It's being mindful.
Yeah, but you can be mindful of a rock and the physicality of the rock. That's a different point, right? That's a different point, right? So, but that takes training. That takes training. This, says the Alter Rebbe, is what faith is called. It's a very unique idea. Faith is usually meant something beyond the person that you have to accept, right? It's beyond the person. And in a sense, it is. The rock is beyond you. The heavens are beyond you. And what are we saying? You have to train yourself to habitually look at it and see that there's a spirit behind it, the Spirit of God, the Ein Sof that's animating it. But this is called faith, because the word faith in Hebrew, emunah, comes from oimen, which means a craftsman. A craftsman is an individual who has a talent. But if you have a talent, you don't habituate your talent. In other words, you have a talent to be an artist, but you don't habituate yourself in using your hands in an artistic manner, you will never reveal the talent, right? Exactly. Make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So a Jew has a talent. And you know what that is? For God's presence, for God's reality. Why? Because it's part of the soul. What we need to do is habituate ourselves to be able to see that in everything. So what we're taking is something that is already a part of us, and we're training ourselves to be able to train the talent that I have for the presence of God, that I'm able to perceive it. Not, as we've learned till now, till today's class, is God seeing me. Now what we're saying is, it's even a deeper, more profound, I'm seeing him. In other words, when I look up to heaven, I see a cloudy day, I say, oh, that weatherman, he blew it. He said it's going to be a sunny day, and look at it, it's cloudy. It's not the weatherman. Don't shoot the messenger, as we always do. It's not the weatherman.
There's God in clouds.
Oh, exactly. There's God in the clouds, right? That means it's coming from God. So when we go and we look at the heavens above, all we see, something simple as a rock or whatever it is, that we habituate ourselves to understand that God is the force of it, and it's not what the naked eye is just seeing in the physical flesh. Right? That's what it means. That's what it means. Faith and Emunah. So we have a talent for that. It just sometimes get rusty, and we look at the physical and we just see it for the physical. Right? Why? Because that's natural for us. When I look at another person and I see them, without doubt, I know that they have a soul that's animating them, right? I know that. I don't need faith for that. I don't need faith for that. I mean, sometimes the way people might act, you might think that, they're a soulless individual, right? Right. But we don't need faith for that. Maybe the faith I might need is in that soulless person that they can return to good, right? That would take faith. But here we're talking about the experience day in, day out that we have with the physical world. Our natural way is with the five senses is to see only that which the five senses give me a perception of. So we have the talent that we can habituate ourselves, just like in that king has a soul, and that's why you fear the king, is because of the soul that animates the king, not because of the flesh of the king.
Yeah.
So likewise, I can have a fear of God by perceiving that he is the reality of everything before me. He is what the inward vitality in everything, which I don't get lost with the outer garments. It's like a king is wearing many garments. It's the same king, whether he's wearing just one garment or he's wearing 5 garments, right? It's the same king inside of it, inside of all of those garments. So likewise, God can garb himself with a sun, with a moon, with matter, with 5 senses that we can, engage with the cup of coffee, right? No, that we can engage with it in 5 senses rather than the fact that this is animated by God. And one of the ways that we display that faith is by the fact that we make a blessing over it, by the fact that it's kosher, by the fact that we have an awareness that it's not just David's wonderful coffee. It's God's animating it and giving it its properties and its qualities and so on and so forth. Very powerful. I'm very practical. Yes, exactly. I'm very practical. Yeah, but again, what we need to do, and which is not so easy because it's not instinctual. Instinctually, we're drawn by our 5 senses, right? So, the coffee tastes good. I'm a chaya, right? Pleasant scene of a nice flower arrangement. Your eyes are drawn by the beautiful flower arrangement. We're not perceiving the spirit behind it naturally. We have to, we got to habituate ourselves for that. So by Chassidim, as we see in learning over here in Tanya, that the whole world is a metaphor for God. It's only a metaphor for God. That's all it is. Because that's all it is, in fact. So when you habituate yourself and you're seeing it, and you can see the message, so to speak, in it, like you said, oh, all right, A cloudy day, oh yeah, you could see if it's God animating the cloudy day, so then there can be a positive message you're going to take from it, and you're not going to say, "Oh, I was hoping for some sun." But why? Because that's your five senses that you're attuned to. But when you recognize, no, there's something deeper over here. God's animating it. So in that clouds, you know what? There's something wonderful there. That's how you're going to take it. So not only that's the consequence of you'll take it in a positive way because you're going to perceive, right? But that's already the consequence of it. But the thing itself, what is it? Is just like the king himself. What is he? A piece of flesh. The brain was it's a piece of flesh, not a piece of flesh. No, there's a soul that's animating that person, right? There's intelligence that are not, when you look at you look at a brain, what do you see? You see a bunch of mush. Just because we've experienced, only because we've experienced intelligence day in, day out to what people are doing, even though today maybe you might say there's so little of that, if you open up the news at least, right? Don't open up the news, right? So that way you'll stay tuned here and there'll be some intelligence, right? But only because we know of that, only because we know that the king and the person has a soul. That's a given. So we don't need to habituate ourselves in that manner, but everything else we have to habituate ourselves because like the coffee or the food or anything else, we've been so habituated to only perceive it with the five senses. And that's reality, is the five senses, nothing more. So it takes effort. Huh?
A book, for example.
Meaning?
See a book, but there's more than just a book there.
Yeah, right. There's a teachings, there's a wisdom. Yeah, exactly. Right. Again, but the difference is with a book, you've experienced it. That's, the book isn't for the sight of it. It is for the reading of it, right? So what you're going to gain from that reading. But most of our, that's why, a lot of people don't read books, is because that's already not one of the five senses, right? It's not one of the five senses, really.
No, it's the mind.
It's the mind.
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't like to read books. A lot of people, they just want to be tantalized with them. Because from as a little child, what was your world? Five senses, that's all, right? Touch. You touched something, you like that touch. So then the 6-month-old is playing with it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The palate, they got some food. Oh, it liked that taste. Didn't like that. The other thing, its taste, for whatever reason. Right? It saw something shiny that caught its attention. So what do we habituate ourselves as little kids? Naturally, right? So that's a lot to overcome. So we grow older, we understand that behind food, it's actually interesting. Now, like, how are people looking at food?
They worship it, some people.
It's inflated.
Right, but no, in a positive. Let's you're right. They worship it because of the palate,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
How are more refined people looking at food?
Because of its health qualities, what are those?
In terms of its nourishment and health, it's always been looked at, but today something unique. It's looked as medicine. Today, people, I watch podcasts on this. People will look at food as medicine.
Mhm.
In other words, you don't need a pill to cure cancer. In the food is the medicine. In the food is the medicine. Now, there's two ways it can be as medicine. It can be medicine that is before you get the illness, right? That it is
It's
right.
preventative.
It's preventative,
Yeah.
right? And not just preventative, more than preventative. It is. It has healing qualities to it, right?
It's meant to keep you healthy, so that
Right. So it's more than just preventative. It is itself a positive
Yeah.
tool, right? That is increasing health, so to speak, right? And of course, preventative in preventative. And when, God forbid, there is a problem, that food can be, right? That's how it's being. That's only recent. Never, it was, never looked at it that way. That's seeing food, right? In a much more profound manner of that it's you're seeing the soul of food, not the form and the physicality of food.
Yeah.
The physicality of food is just something tasty
Yeah.
and nourishing. Nourishing. It gives you nourishment, it gives you vitality, right?
Mhm.
Healing? That's a pill. That's what we got, pop a pill, it's going to heal you. That's what we've been, no. Food, healing. Oh, I mean, God put into food such a quality. That's really what it is. And it's really coming to recognize that even in something so simple as that we take for granted is really only a physical, is really got a great spirit behind it. Amazing. Herbal medicine, yeah, it has that quality.
The wellness industry is happening,
Yeah,
not the sickness industry.
exactly. Yeah, doctors have been trained. The old form of medicine is doctors were trained that you need to be sick so I could heal you.
Mhm.
And the truth is, the reason for that is very simple. The only way I'm going to make money is if you're sick so I could heal you.
Mhm.
The only way I can make fame is if you're sick and I find a cure for you. So it's part of the human condition, right? That's again based on the five senses, based on a physical reality, right? That propels people. But what we're learning over here, that there's something deeper than that, right? There's the spirit of the person in them. There is the spirit of God in everything, which is the most deepest idea. And therefore, it is a tool. It becomes a tool for for health, for living.
Well, the world there is changing.
Hmm?
The world is changing. People have seen before the fact.
So, right. So you could see with the physical eye what's going on in the world. A lot of anti-Semitism, a lot of darkness. And it's true, there is. But that's not looking with your mind's eye. That's not looking based on your faith.
Yeah.
Right. That's not looking and seeing the godliness. So here's a simple, I'm just bringing this simple example of how many people are looking at food as medicine. Right. So imagine eating food without, the truth is I can't say that I do this. I'm totally myself, but
You know, sugar.
I have a question, but I
Yeah.
don't know if you're waiting for the people.
Yeah, give me just 1 second before I don't want to lose here the feed, see if anything. Don't see so far. By the way, folks, TRC today at 4 o'clock.
You'll see 4.
TRC, yeah.
Let me link. Please. Perfect.
Yeah, food has always been medicine, but it's and actually the ancients probably saw it, many people saw it that way, but we've gone away from it. So as I was mentioning huh?
That is true.
Yeah.
Yes.
As I was mentioning, so you know, we you know, the doctors, they, because Western culture is there has to be a problem that I could fix. Not only that I can make money, but it also gives me a sense of purpose and value.
Yeah.
You need to be, if I give you something, right, that means I fulfilled, I feel good about myself because I was able, you know, we as humans, we don't want to be takers, we want to be givers. That's natural. So we want to give. So imagine, you know, I gave to society the cure for cancer. Ooh, that's a pretty, you know, formidable sense of self-fulfillment, right? So it's in the nature of human being, right, to want to have a problem that they can fix. So therefore, in med school, they only have 2 classes of nutrition because nutrition is healing you before there is a sickness, right? So that's going contrary to, you know, everything of Western culture. Yeah, go ahead.
So I have these 2 different concepts in my mind from what we've learned from Tanya. On the one hand is what you shared in this class, and I think you've kind of shared it in other ones about how God's essence, there's God in everything, there's God in like the fly, there's God in the rock, there's God in every essence of everything, which I understand. Then this other sort of thing, which is that, for instance, like, you know, Jews have like a divine soul and there's certain like qualities that Jews have, and then that like minerals have like more constrained sort of the divine light, and other animals might be a little bit more. So trying to like rectify those 2, is this like there's like a baseline sort of equal essence of God everywhere, or is it like that there are certain areas where there's more concentrations, if you will, of God, or more absence of God? I'm just trying to understand if it's like everyone has the same essence and it's just really an illusion, every sort of difference, not everyone, everything, or if there's like different sorts of ways in which it's showing up.
Very good question.
Interesting. Chabad is the answer.
Hmm?
Chabad, Ahmad. That's basically what we're talking about, more or less.
You're tying into what he's saying? Are you tying into, I'm not, because I don't, are you going somewhere else?
No.
Because I don't see I'm not clear on the connection that you're making. I'm not clear what you're saying.
Saying the joining the factor of everybody's perceptions and so forth. If everybody was using Ahmad or relating to it, it would be more universal.
Okay. All right. I'm not clear where you're going with that. Okay. There's God as creator and creation. And in that there is a hierarchy. You know, man on top, animal, vegetation, inanimate. Like you said, greater contraction on the light of God. Therefore, what comes out on the other end is inanimate because it's the greatest contraction. Lesser contraction, you know, as you go up the Seder Ishtalshelus, right? The order of creation. But that's all in its perception, shall we say. In the end, everything is coming from God, right? And there's equalization on some level between the inanimate and even the human being, right? On some level, right? On some level. So even there's so there's two things at the same time. There's a hierarchy, and then there's no hierarchy because God is completely removed from any kind of hierarchy, right? I'm going to give a brief answer to this because this itself take a long time. So both are true, right? So so in that sense, there's an equality in everything, that it's all from God. But then there is not God as creator. Like, yeah, I take that from on human terms. There's you and what you do. You as creator, right, of your world, the things that you do. But that's just what you do. That's not who you are. So when it comes to God and him, he himself, that's a different story.
He himself has to.
As opposed to creator, what he does, right?
So what he does versus what he is.
Exactly. What is he? He is the one that has chosen, for whatever reason, that he wants a dwelling place in this low world, and he wants us to create that dwelling place for him, and that our souls are inherently bound up and one with him, and that he wants us to fulfill his mandate. That's what he wants. That's not who he is. That's what he wants. Big difference. That's already not part of creation. Creation is only in order that he can have fulfilled what he wants. And that's a relationship with us. So it's a relationship with non-Jews through 7 Noahide laws, right? That create a world that can be a world of peace, right? Non-conflict, a world of non-conflict. And then the Jewish people that bring the presence of God to the world. Only the Jews can do that. Because look at Tanya, no one else has such a teachings. Doesn't exist anywhere. Only the Jew can do that. Not to exclusion of the non-Jew, it's on the contrary, to include the non-Jew, right? But they're not the ones going to do it. That's why the Jewish people are God's people. I mean, God's people, not ultimately, we're not because of that, for the reason of that, but that just reflects it. We are because we are. Just like God wants a dwelling place in this world, just because. In other words, it's not for the reason, because it's for the reason, then it's not for us, or it's not for, this is what he wants. So why does he want it? Because this is him. So he chose. So that's not part of creation. That's beyond creation. That's in brief.
Spark notes.
All right. That's heavy duty.
Very heavy duty.
Yeah.
Artists.
Since Davida has a question, since Jews have a divine spark inside of them, are we more attuned to see Hashem in everything than non-Jews? Yes, because of that Jewish soul. That doesn't mean we, in the end, do that, but that is, and that becomes therefore, because more attuned, so therefore more responsible as a result, right? That's what it means. That's why when someone wants to convert to Judaism, we tell them, why do you want to convert? If you you know, if you don't keep Shabbos once you convert, you're liable to the death penalty. Not today because we don't have Sanhedrin, right? But it's very serious. You have a much greater responsibility to God. So therefore, think it over. You don't need to have God in your life and to be a good person in the eyes of God. You don't need to be Jewish. You need to keep 7 Noahide laws that the Torah speaks about, yes. But you don't need to be Jewish. It's heavy duty. Right? Right.
People see us differently. The men, do you recognize that we're different?
Sorry?
Do people recognize that we're different?
Yeah, that's why they're starting up with us all the time. That's why for the last 3,000 years, everybody starts up with the Jews.
The fear?
Whatever. It's because we are different, we are unique. Whether it's fear, whether it's hatred, whether it's whatever it is, well, doesn't make sense. Why would they do that?
The Jew is seen as the other.
Huh?
The Jew is seen as the other.
Yeah, but however, it's going to reflect itself in many different ways,
Yeah, that's
right?
the other.
Yeah.
What? Other is just
Yeah.
not just
Yeah.
the other person, the other religion, the other people, the other something.
Yeah.
We're on a walk with Israel, eh?
Okay, David, can we like just stick to what we're doing over here and not go elsewhere, please? No, it's not related, and I just want to stick to what's going on here, okay?
Mhm.
Lori, going to war with Hashem. I don't know which was that. Oh, okay. When humans live in peace, are we living in peace with Hashem? And when humans go to war, is it like warring with Hashem? Ultimately, yeah, that's true. It's true what you're saying. I mean, you could go to war. King David went to war for God, right? And now Israel, the IDF, is going to war for God, not against God, because we have an obligation to eradicate evil. Hamas is evil. And if anybody needs an explanation of why, I hate to say this, but you are in the same camp. In the same camp of evil. Because if anybody needs an explanation of to why Hamas is evil, and that means you've lost your way. So therefore, we have an obligation to go to war against. It's not vengeance. We're not doing it out of vengeance. We're doing it because this is what God expects from us. And we have to do it. We have to do it. We're not getting back. We're not getting even. We have an obligation to eradicate evil. Now, we have the obligation to eradicate the evil in us, and evil thoughts, and right, and so on. But to eradicate evil is an obligation. And, depending on the circumstance of how you will play it itself out and do that will be, if you see someone who's taking a gun and wants to hurt somebody, or takes a knife and wants to hurt somebody, well, you have an obligation to stop that person if you can. I mean, if you're going to put yourself in harm's way, might be a different story. But if you can stop that person, you have an obligation to do that. Who says? God says. The Torah says. That's where we take our guidance from. Well, that's what we're doing here. We're learning Torah together. So that's where we're taking our guidance from. So Lori, in your question, sometimes you have to fight a war, but if you're fighting that war to eradicate evil, right? Now, someone would say, oh, well, that's what Hamas did. That's what Hamas did. You know, they're eradicating the evil of the Zionists in Israel.
Yeah.
If that needs an explanation, I'm not giving an explanation, because that means you are, is in Torah's perspective, not my perspective, in Torah's perspective, you're an evil person. Or at least that idea is evil. That idea is evil. Now, if some of you don't like that, it's fine. You know, I'm not here to make you my friend. I'm here to make you a friend of God. Make you closer to God. And that's through Torah. And that's what we're doing here, right? Yeah, Laurie, is when the Jews are attacked, this is God is attacked. Exactly. Yeah, well said. Yeah. Now, as is very clear for those who follow, this is very painful that this is what we have to do. Jews celebrate, they don't celebrate that they killed somebody. They don't get on their phone on October 7th and call it, Mom, I just killed 4 Jews. No Israeli soldier a Jew got on a phone to call their mother and said, I just killed a Hamas. Let's celebrate. No one ever did that, because we're Jews. And Jews celebrate life, not the opposite. We're doing something that's necessary. It's not a necessary evil. Actually, it's not a necessary evil. That's actually important to note. It's a necessary mitzvah. That is not the one we want to do, but the one we have to do. But it's the one we have to do. There's no choice. And this is not just for the Jewish people. This is for all of humanity. Well, that's very important. You should appreciate that. All right. All right, folks. I don't know how we got onto that at the end, but we did. All right. Rambam coming up.